Good morrow, nerds. It is I. No man is an island, or so they say. And that is just as true for NPCs in your tabletop RPG settings. Rather than working alone, plenty of them will be part of some larger group, a megacorp, a gang of bandits, a church. But before we synergize ourselves, the ultimate megacorp, I have 3 buttons that I'd love it if you'd click. And those are like, subscribe, and the bell for notifications. So, throughout this video, I'm going to be using the word organization a lot. And for the sake of this video making sense, I am going to define organization as follows. Any group of individuals that exists within a campaign setting comprising one or more NPCs that act independently of the PCs. Note this is a video about world building for tabletop RPGs. You can use this for other projects, but that's not what the advice is geared towards. Now, this can cover a wide variety of organizations, from corporations, gangs, bandits, priesthoods, cults. Any of them can fall under this umbrella, as long as they fall within that very vague definition. In some cases, PCs can be members of these organizations, and even if they aren't, they can be friendly to them. They could also be neutral, or this organization could even be the antagonist of the campaign. The next thing we need to cover is that whatever this organization is, it has a reason to exist, or possibly several. In the case of a megacorp, it exists to make money. More specifically, it exists to make money by capitalizing on a niche within the market. A group of bandits also exists to make money, but in this case, they make their money by capitalizing on the vulnerability of people traveling from one place to another. A church or cult, there's a bit of a blurry line between those two, but whatever. A church or cult exists to venerate a specific deity or other divine phenomenon. In that sense, they exist to self-propagate, to spiritually enlighten their members, and in some cases they will also have darker motives. It should be noted that when you're coming up with the reasons for existence of your organizations, you really do need to play it straight. If you are a vehement anti-capitalist and you're trying to design a corporation, leave your own opinions about how corporations work to one side and think like a corporation. If you are vehemently anti-religion and you're trying to come up with a reason for existence of a religious organization, leave your religious views to one side and think like a religion. If you are vehemently anti-government and you're trying to design a government, leave your opinions to one side and think like a government. If you do not do this, it will kneecap your world building. The reason that you need a clear vision for what the organization actually does is that this purpose should be informing what you are doing at every step of the design process. From initial concept to internal structure to coming up with the individual members. All of this should be in service of that higher vision. And if it is counter to that vision, there should be a good reason that it is counter to that vision. In fact, you should really think about the organizations you come up with, the way that players think about their characters. You should be attached to them and want the best for them, and in so doing, make the smartest possible decisions as them that you can. Now, in terms of who or what makes up your organization, I tend to divide this into 3 main categories: the leadership, the middle management, and the rank and file. There are other ways to do this, but this is how I conceive of things. I like my little organization charts. Starting at the top, we have leadership. This is one person or a small group of people who control the overall direction of the organization. They usually don't have much power over the day-to-day affairs, simply because it isn't practical for them to. Even in our modern day, with advanced communication technology like computers, phones, emails, video conferencing, our hierarchical structures within companies haven't got flatter. Instead, we've used these advantages to just make our companies bigger. Now we come to the middle management. These guys are in a leadership position of sorts. They do have power over the day-to-day actions of the organization, but they only have power within their limited spheres. If you have, say, a group of bandits, they may be divided up into various cells that patrol various ambush sites along a major road. Each of those ambush sites will be led by some bandit lieutenant. That lieutenant controls everything that happens at that ambush site, but they do not have power over whoever runs the overall group, and they don't have power over what happens to the other sites. Likewise, the head of HR has a lot of power over things like hiring decisions, internal company communications, and stuff like that. They do not control the finances, they do not handle marketing, and they do not get to tell the CEO what to do. Actually, that's a bad example. HR managers sometimes do, on the basis of compliance, but that's a whole nother topic. Finally, we have the rank and file. These are the individual members of the organization who get things done. They very rarely have individual autonomy over what they're doing. They're usually told what to do by middle management. And so all they're really left to do is to go through with things. This will be your everyday bandits, your corporate goons, your cult devotees. These are the majority of organization members that your PCs will interact with. Now, it should be noted, many organizations will have more than 3 layers, and some of them will only have 2, a leader and a small group of followers. In that case, you can adjust the structure as needed. You might say that like 1 or 2 influential members in a 2-level hierarchy are the middle management. You might divide things up and say that everyone in the C-suite is the leadership, and anyone above team leader is the middle management. You can divide things up how you want. But there is one special extra 4th category that falls in here, and that is the organization's point of contact. Everything that we've set up to now is abstract world building, but this is where we actually come to the tabletop RPG bit. While some players are willing to read the lore dumps that their GM provides them, most aren't. And even if they do, sooner or later, they will interact with this organization in play. And they will do that through whatever point of contact you have put in front of them. This is an NPC, or group of NPCs, that the PCs interact with who represent in some way the organization. They can be from pretty much any level of the hierarchy, but as a general rule, the more important the PCs are, the more important the NPC points of contact are. Interactions with this point of contact can be friendly or unfriendly, and can be RP or combat. If you are fighting a combat against a bunch of corporate thugs, they are your points of contact. If, on the other hand, you're trying to negotiate with a corporate representative without using pistols, well, that's RP. And it's important to remember that the experience that the players have with this point of contact will be what informs their impression of the organization. You could, for instance, have the point of contact be someone who is very open, warm, and friendly, and in that case, they will have a generally positive view of this organization. You could put a twist on things and have them be outwardly friendly, but perhaps as a guise for either being manipulative or in some way dishonest or judgmental. In that case, while the PCs might have an initial good impression of the organization, the more they get to know this point of contact, the more that their impression of the entire organization will go down the hole. On the other hand, if that point of contact is hostile from the outset, say, showing up and shooting them, yeah, they're not going to like your organization. They just won't. Although saying that, if perhaps this contact is hostile but still useful, now that is an interesting relationship. Part of the idea of a point of contact is to make this organization seem more human, more comprehensible. A megacorp or large religious group or organized crime ring can seem very opaque to the player characters and very difficult to understand on an emotional level. And if you want to get around that, then the people that your PCs interact with need to feel as human as possible. The easiest starting point for this is to give them all unique names and appearances. I have been doing this for quite some time now in my current cyberpunk campaign. Every NPC outside of a random encounter has a name and a unique AI-generated portrait, but appearance is only skin deep. Whoever works for your organization needs a damn good motive for doing so. If it's a religious organization, that's pretty simple. Hey, I want to go to heaven. They say they can get me to heaven. I'm going to work for them. If it's something like organized crime, well, you've got a few options here. They could be in it for the money, they could have fallen in with the wrong crowd and simply feel unable to escape, or they could be a genuinely sadistic person for whom this is the only way to do the things that they enjoy the most. And through these methods, you should always be trying to give them a sense of individuality. They need to feel like their own person, linked to this organization, but still somewhat separate from it. Now that means that they may have motives or interests that in some ways go against the organization. Now, this shouldn't completely undermine their relationship irreparably. You may want to finish earlier on Friday so you can spend more time with your friends and family, but your boss might not want you to do that. Now, most people in this situation don't just up and leave their jobs. Some will, but most won't. And that's kind of the mindset you need to have. If there's going to be anything that goes counter to the organization, it must be small enough that it wouldn't crash this point of contact's relationship to their superiors. Now, the more human that each member of this organization feels, the more human the organization feels, the more alive it feels, the more realistic it feels, and the more that the PCs will care about it, And by extension, the more they'll care about the setting, and the more they'll care about your campaign. As much as the incomprehensibly large, incredibly opaque, monolithic corporation is a classic trope of fiction, it's not easy to connect with on an emotional level, at least in my opinion. And since tabletop RPGs live and die on the emotional investment of your players, I wouldn't be making Faceless Corps if I were you. And this leads me into a few points that I have about what I consider like the key principles for actually making your organization feel realistic. And the first of those, which is probably already clear by now, is that not everybody should get along. The rank and file should blame the management and leadership for everything that goes wrong, because that's what people do. And likewise, the leadership should blame the management and rank and file for everything that goes wrong, because again, that's what people do. And even within the same echelon of the organization, solidarity shouldn't be that widespread. If people have personal friendships or, some sense of respect for each other, yes, they will cooperate fine. But if they don't, if they're competing with each other for the same promotion, if one of them has slighted the other in the past, or if they just don't click with each other, then yes, they should be disagreeing with each other. They should be trying to undermine each other. That's good, that's fine. Now, some GMs will immediately worry that this will make, especially antagonist organizations, feel weak. That adding internal strife and discord to the daily operations of this organization will just give the PCs another way to undermine them. And to that I say, they can certainly try. As it stands, a lot of modern RPGs have very easy combat rules, meaning that whatever you throw at them, the PCs will be able to handle it, but actually fairly difficult skill checks. If you have a 50 to 60% chance of succeeding an average difficulty check as an average skill person, then you'll be failing in a lot of social interactions. Which means that first off, the players might have a harder time dealing with social discord within an organization than they would just killing the members. Even if they do manage to exploit these weaknesses, to manipulate the middle management by playing off different teams against each other, who cares? Either they defeat the enemies one way, or they defeat them another. Either they fail one way, or they fail another. As long as the integrity of the campaign has not been violated in some way, and as long as everybody's having fun, what's the harm? In my last D&D campaign, the antagonist was the undead army of an ancient wight who had been reawakened and was now trying to reconquer the local area. Now, he had operating under him a number of less powerful wights, who were his lieutenants and did all of his dirty work. All of them hated each other. They hated each other when they were alive, and now that they were undead, they still hated each other, because time does not in fact heal all wounds. As a result, these lieutenants went around doing things like not telling each other what the PCs were up to, actively getting into reckless situations to try and score themselves credit, and plenty of other dumb little tricks. And my players ate it up. It actually made these 2,000-year-old undead monsters feel more human, and it didn't really change in any meaningful way the outcome of the campaign. Even if the lieutenants all worked in perfect lockstep, we were still playing D&D 5e. The PCs would find a way to hit point to death all of the NPCs. And even if we were playing a more challenging system, I had 5 players in this group and only one me. Sooner or later, they would have found a way to outthink me. They just would have. But even with all of this infighting, you should always keep the organization's goals in mind, especially when it comes to how they interact with the PCs. If a corporation's job is to make money, then sending a bunch of very obvious hit teams against the PCs over and over and over and over and failing is not a good way to make money. First off, every time someone dies, depending on how nice the corporation is, they may owe the deceased person's family some money, which means that they make less money. Furthermore, everyone that dies has to be rehired, which means you have to go through the hiring process, which takes time and money. You have to train a new person, which again takes time and money. And so if your casualty rate is too high, then that's going to start eating into your bottom line. Furthermore, if those strike teams are very indiscreet, well, that can end up affecting the company's public image and cost them valuable customers. Now, there are exceptions to this. First off, your corporation might want people to know that they were the ones responsible, especially if they don't expect any serious legal or financial consequences. An interesting quirk of the kind of cyberpunk assumption of corporations having their own armed goons that they send around to do their bidding is if everyone's doing it, it would almost form a corporate goon cartel where as long as everybody keeps using violence to solve all their problems, using violence to solve your problems will be acceptable. And anyone who doesn't want to use violence will quickly find their defenseless little heads kicked in. So yeah, sometimes the tropes do make sense, sometimes they don't. You will have to decide these things on a case-by-case basis. Because yes, you should be ensuring that your organizations do behave realistically. As I said, don't just have them send meat waves at the PCs. That is completely inefficient. Sure, they might send a meat wave or two at the PCs, but once they realize that doesn't work, they can change up their tactics. They might use, say, smaller, more elite units. Or they might go for something completely different. They might use bribery, deception, hostages, bargaining, any number of other tricks. Because if violence doesn't work, then most people are smart enough to change tack. And of course, for the ultimate sandbox feel, when your organizations are going about their realistic business to achieve their realistic goals, some of that just won't involve the PCs. This will be stuff that they hear about that, again, makes sense, lines up with their goals, all of that jazz, but that they have no effect over. For some GMs, this will just feel like wasted time and effort. But if you go through with it, it will make your world feel larger and richer. Now, a lot of organizations that you'll end up making as a GM will be antagonist organizations. So I do have a few points about all of these. First off, consider everything this organization can throw at your players. Everything, not just how many meat sacks, but what types of meat sacks. Untrained meat sacks, fanatical meat sacks, elite meat sacks, unenthusiastic meat sacks who aren't very good at saying no, or if you don't want to use meat sacks, and you shouldn't always want to use meat sacks, well, you do have some options. First off, consider their financial or social resources. Can they bribe the PCs, trick them, damage their reputations? In my last D&D campaign, the party set off on their final mission with 2 NPC companions provided to them by the local lord. Now, eventually, they got into a quarrel with these 2 companions, and one of them died, and the other ended up becoming a prisoner of the PCs. Now, this put everyone in a tough situation. On the one hand, killing one government employee and arresting another is a crime, just out and out, that would very easily have had them all sentenced to death. On the other hand, as a solitary prisoner, that one surviving companion couldn't hope to take on the PCs and free herself. But the threat of what she could say if she survived did certainly disquiet the PCs. And in the end, they actually had to negotiate with her to get her to accentuate the PC's positive qualities and perhaps overlook some of their more negative actions in her report back to the Lord. When it comes to any threats that this organization may throw at the PCs, start small and work up. If the organization controls dragons, maybe it's a high fantasy setting, or you're playing in Shadowrun, maybe this organization could throw a bunch of dragons at the PCs first thing. However, in most cases, especially if the PCs aren't known to be a threat, whether or not they actually are a threat, well, that would just seem like a waste of a perfectly good dragon. And this is why sometimes you don't want your points of contact to be immediately hostile. It gives you a starting point from which you can escalate. And remember, the goals of the organization should go above and beyond whatever the PCs are doing, and so while they will interact with the PCs through their points of contact, that should always be viewed through the lens of their goals. The reason that the megacorp is going after the PCs is because the megacorp wants to make money, and the PCs are interfering with that. They want to buy up the local land and turn everything into a petrochem chew farm, and the PCs aren't letting them. That's the issue. How do they deal with this and still make money? Or conversely, they're a bunch of bandits trying to start a rebellion to overthrow the king. Everything they do involving the PCs should be viewed through this lens. But of course, not all organizations will be enemies. Some of them will actually be helpful. Now, there are 2 cases in the situation. The first is that the PCs are members of this organization. So for instance, in my last D&D campaign, my PCs were actually hired to do some scouting work by a bunch of bandits. And so while those bandits did eventually become a hostile organization, initially, they were friendly. They were on the same side. The PCs were even technically employees. But in other cases, the organization will be independent but willing to cooperate. When I ran Cyberpunk Red in a West Marches server, across my various interlinked one-shots, a couple of times the PCs leaned on a nomad pack that I invented called the Greyhounds. They ran into them as part of a mission, they made friends with them, and when they needed help that involved long-haul trucking in future missions, they were like, "Hey, can we talk to the Greyhounds?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, go ahead." You should always consider what this organization has to offer. In the case of the bandits that my PCs were working for, well, what they had to offer was money. It was that simple. There wasn't much to it. On the other hand, in my current cyberpunk campaign, my PCs are all members of their Reclaimer Town's local militia. They don't get money, but they do get free lifestyle, and they are held in slightly higher esteem by the town's residents for all of the things that they've done. In the case of my current campaign, well, they have to stand night watch a couple of times a month, which hasn't been too much of an issue for them yet. But if I'm not mistaken, their next patrols are going to be in a day or two in character, and that will mean that I get to use my new encounter table that I haven't told them about until now. Oh yeah, players, there's a new encounter table for Night Watch. Have fun. I should note though that the benefits should usually outweigh the drawbacks of being part of an organization or simply working alongside them, because otherwise the PCs just won't want to do it. It's that simple. My PCs were initially happy to work with the bandits because from their point of view, they had the same goal of deal with this undead problem. But when they found out that those bandits were trying to keep the local authorities from knowing about the undead, to discredit the authorities to help them trigger a rebellion, and that in the course of this, they were systematically murdering anyone heading for the local major town, well, suddenly, being the bandits' friends didn't seem like such a good idea, and their point of contact from that first initial meeting found her skull popped open like a watermelon. And finally, friendly organizations are a great way to show how the PC's actions affect the world. If they are successful in whatever they're doing, they can be promoted up the ranks, or they can see how the organization grows, how the office gets nicer decor from all the extra money they have, things like that. On the other hand, if they fail, they can face demotion or expulsion, they can watch the organization's available resources slowly dwindling, and it can give them a very clear sense of the impact that their actions have. And finally, just one quick little tip. Every now and then, you'll make mistakes in how you handle organizations. This is fine. There is a really easy, in-character way to fix that, and that is a change of leadership. Some new leader or middle manager comes in after the last guy got displaced by one means or another. As new authority figures are wont to do, they go around changing everything to match their perfect little image of how things should be, and that conveniently involves removing all of the meat waves that you've been sending at the PCs up until now. Just a little tip. And it's a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please like it, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down below. What's your favourite organisation that you ever came up with for one of your campaigns? Or if you're a player, what's your favourite organisation that you encountered? If you'd like to see more videos like this one, then please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It really does help the channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and given that we're going at like 30 subs a week at the moment, we're making great progress. Now, last week I said that since my Pathfinder campaign would be continuing weekly for the foreseeable future, I would have to start changing my outro. Well, guess whose Pathfinder campaign fell apart? So, it seemed that instead of doing 2 hours of slowly, painstakingly exploring the menace under Otari, I will be spending 2 hours staring at a wall and contemplating the meaning of existence, or the lack thereof. But once more though, thank you all so much for watching. Until I see you next, farewell.